It still amazes me that he's not here. At 35, he was 6 years my senior and far too young to pass away. But then again, he died a horrible, miserable death on the streets of some third-world country, not a natural death. Killed along with a number of the men he was attempting to transact business with. It turns out that they were upscale drug dealers attempting to enter the legal market, not the dignified businessmen they had made Steve believe they were. In an attempt to destroy them as competitors in the business world, their rivals used 4 machine guns in a drive-by. Steve was nearly sliced in half by the 17 lucky hits he received. If it was any comfort, he died from blood loss in a matter of minutes, so his suffering was brief. I pondered whether he gave Jen, his stunning wife, and their impending family planning any thought. I questioned whether he'd had time to feel regret and realize he ought to have been content with what he had. Heck, he had already made millions upon millions of dollars. That wasn't Steve at all. Instead, he was compulsive, constantly searching for the best offer, the one that would make him a household name among his contemporaries. He was pretty sure this was it. As was customary with all of his transactions, he discussed it with me. Usually it was just the two of us fishing on his boat. I would grin as I looked at him. "You really expect an intelligent answer? I don't understand what you're talking about most of the time. This stuff is giving me a headache. Now, are you out here to get Mr. Big or what?" He would reply with a grin, "Mr. Big, definitely. Hey, did I show you my new rod? It's supposed to be the best. Think it will help me any? Oh, and I know you don't care or understand what I'm saying, it just helps me to say it out loud. Can't do that in the office, the walls have ears." All I could do was sigh. He would play around with the rod, which likely cost me a third of my annual salary, become irritated, throw it to the ground, pick up the old 5.5-foot rod I'd given him with the nearly antique Zebco 33, and begin catching fish. If you don't count the boat, he probably spent $10,000 on fishing gear during the time I knew him. I tried teaching him, but he never paid attention. The fish had to almost kill itself on his hook before he managed to catch one, but even so, he had a great time trying. I'd learned from my time with Uncle Sam that there was probably nowhere safe to talk. Any of the boats that were visible to us might have been equipped with technology that let them listen in on our conversations as if they were right behind us. In addition, they might have hacked phones and videos and used lip readers to analyze the conversation. There were countless opportunities. But I let him go. He was probably safe because what he discussed had nothing to do with corporate espionage or national security. I did express my opinion for the first time since our meeting. "You need to think about this, dude. I've been where you're going, and it ain't Paris. People there would cut your throat for your watch and shoes. Hire security while you're there and listen to them. Almost no one there is what they seem." He merely chuckled and attempted to persuade me to accompany him. I declined with grace. He gave up on Mr. Big after a few hours and found solace in a bottle of gin. We moved him from his truck into the living room and laid him down on the couch, and I scowled as we did so. In minutes, he started to snore. "Want me to help get him into bed?" Jen gave a melancholic grin. "Not really. Let him sleep it off there, and when he wakes up with a stiff neck and an aching back, he might think about it before he does it again. I swear, Jamie, you bring out the best and the worst in him, usually at the same time." "How do you do that?" I gave a shrug. "Natural talent, I guess. Surely his other friends bring him home blasted sometimes." I wasn't sure how to react to her response. "He doesn't have any other friends, Jamie. All the rest want something from him, or he wants something from them. With those guys, you don't just hang out. Every party is a business meeting, every social event is just an opportunity to network. It's all about the business, baby." That can't be true. When he's around me, we rarely talk about business. Most times it's about hunting, fishing, the wild women we have known and bedded, the ones that got away, the ones we wished had gotten away, hot cars, hot bikes, hot boats. Normal guy stuff. When he does talk business, I don't understand half of what he says anyway. "And that," replied Jen, "is why he loves you. You couldn't give a damn about his money, his status, or his acute business sense. All you care about is the good times you have when you're together. Plus, you don't hesitate to call him out when he starts spouting junk. He loves you because you don't expect anything but friendship from him. One of the best things that ever happened to him was meeting you. She sighed as she gave him a look. They were meant to have a date night, he had told me. He had been ignoring her while business had been very busy. Not a good idea, considering that she was not just smoking hot but extremely hot. Before she stopped after their marriage, she had been a model. She continued to maintain her toned body and work out. She was walking down a street when men walked into doors and buildings. I had witnessed it, so I knew. Aside from her attractive appearance, she had a flawless face, a charming smile, full lips, and captivating blue eyes. The first 3 times I was around her, I was unable to speak at all due to my lack of vocabulary. After forcing me to take 3 shots with her, she spent the next half an hour telling me the dirtiest, nastiest jokes I had ever heard. We have remained friends ever since. I forgot how shy I was laughing so much. I got an idea. You own any jeans? She had only ever worn dresses and skirts, in my opinion. A closet full. Why? Got any boots? Cowboy boots, maybe? It was the first time she had smiled. Why, Jamie, are you getting kinky? Because if you are, I have these thigh-high black boots that go great with my leather corset and flogger. If you mean regular boots, I have them in snakeskin, ostrich skin, and plain old leather. I asked her out after I stopped blushing and she stopped laughing. She was startled and asked me why. Because JY, you need to get out and let go. Let Sleeping Beauty lie, and I'll take you to a world you've never experienced before. She stopped smiling and ran to clarify, I'm going out tonight, a little club that I bet you'd love. You're a very beautiful woman, and I'm sure 99% of men in this world would grovel at your feet for a chance with you. I'm in the 1% here, Jen. I don't trespass, and I respect boundaries. All I'm offering you is a chance to have fun, let your hair down, maybe shake that fantastic rump of yours. I'll watch over you, I'll even take pictures, and you can rub it in when he's nursing his hangover. You seem down, and I thought I'd offer. Will there be beer and rednecks, maybe a bar fight or 2, the second and third, no. Compared to the rest, you don't cause any issues. If you rough up a woman, it hurts a lot, and the bouncers have to fight their way through a throng of people to get to the guy. Upon arriving, their only task is essentially to remove the trash. They prefer to maintain the place's welcoming atmosphere for couples. Thought I'd make the offer. I got up from the kitchen table, rinsed my coffee cup, and set it down on the counter. Jen used to say that my neat nature would make me a great wife one day. We'll take the truck. We'll take the Jag. Every good old boy in the place would have to drool over that Jag if you took it. Now, put on some nice jeans and a shirt, and please, JY, turn down the heat a bit. The way you look right now, I'd get my bum kicked a dozen times trying to protect you. She stuck her tongue out and told me to wait 10 minutes. I told her I needed to go home, have a shower to get the fish smell off me, and get some clean clothes. She grabbed my hand and led me to the master bedroom, something that made me very uncomfortable. Stand here. She walked into his closet, a 12 by 12 room stuffed to the gills. Hers was twice as big. I heard her opening drawers, and she came back with jeans, a western shirt, and anaconda skin boots. I was led down the hall to a guest room with a large bathroom. Here you go. He never wore those new shoes that he purchased a year ago, shortly after he met you. You're getting commando, big boy, because I didn't bring you any boxers. In 20 minutes, tidy up and come see me downstairs. I had to admit, I looked pretty good, for me. Well, they say clothes make the man. If she tried to tone it down, it didn't work. Those jeans looked so tight I was afraid if she sneezed, she'd blow every seam. Her manet of curls was pulled back into something I think was supposed to be a ponytail but looked like a sexy mess. She had a white Stetson in her hands and bright red boots on her feet. She whirled and asked, "Trouble?" I said, "You look like trouble," and she grinned back, "That's exactly the look I was going for. Come on, now." While my truck was still at the marina, we borrowed Steve's, a brand new, shiny Z71 four-door, four-wheel drive hunk of pearl white and gleaming chrome. Well, I thought as I drove to the bar, at least it was a truck. Jen wrote him a note and left it on the coffee table next to a bottle of water and 3 Tylenols. After 40 minutes, we arrived at the barn, a massive structure modeled after, guess what, a barn. While most people were outside admiring the truck, when I got out to assist Jen in getting down, all the guys said, "What truck?" She strutted into the room like she owned it, obviously aware of this and used to the attention, though perhaps she wasn't as confident as she seemed because she had a death grip on my arm and gawked at Jen. There's no other way to put it. As soon as we walked through the door, the place went silent, the band hadn't started, and everyone just stared. I smiled and kept walking, gesturing to Mary to bring me a pitcher, and in just 3 minutes she arrived. She poured Jen a beer, then spilled mine all over the table while staring at her. I took her arm and stopped the flow gently, and she looked down, blushed, and began to apologize. Jen patted her arm and said, "Don't worry about it, honey." I smiled. "Watch out, Jen." I was the same way the first time I saw Jamie. Mary looked from her to me, mumbled something, and left, running into 2 tables before returning to the bar. It was my turn to choke on the beer when I saw the friends I was supposed to meet and waved them over, making the introductions. It took 45 minutes and 3 beers before they relaxed, and by then Jen had them so charmed they would have killed for her. I'd seen her work her magic before, so I just sat back and enjoyed the ride. Mary is a switch hitter, and her on-base average is pretty high. Jen laughed, "She's out of luck." Then I quit playing on both teams when I graduated from college. It took her about 30 seconds to realize that I had a college degree in dance. That song rolled over into a line dance, followed by the cowboy cha-cha-cha. By then, I was out of breath and dragged her back to the table, the pout clearly visible on her face. I grabbed Greg. "I'm tagging out, brother." The band then started up. "See if you can keep up." Before he knew what was going on, she was yanking him from his chair. She actually sat and had a beer. 30 minutes later, she brought him back, huffing and puffing like he was going to have a heart attack. 10 minutes later, the band started playing a really slow song that the crowd called the Snuggle Special. She was out of her chair and tugging, so I gave in. She had no idea that this was probably one of the most erotic experiences I'd ever had, and I tried to pull away, but she looked surprised, then smirked and mulled tighter. When the song stopped, I was in a daze, and it took her some time to get me to let her go. When the music did, I quickly turned red and ran to the bathroom to wash my face and arms with the coldest water I could find, trying to calm down. When I got back, she had Greg on the floor, and I watched as she twirled and swayed to the music. Then Barb got all catty and tried to kill the atmosphere by saying, Jamie, you naughty boy. You mentioned that you would never hook up with a married person, I believe. What man could resist that, of course?" She was staring daggers at Jen. Barb had been a spectacular woman before, 4 kids and 3 divorces. She was only 34, and with the right makeup and lighting, she was still attractive. Not so much in the light of day. She decided I would be lucky number 4 and made a run at me while she was still with number 3. I didn't tell her the thought of being intimate with her was enough to make my skin crawl. They didn't make condoms that strong. I let her down easy, stroking her ego by telling her, as wonderful as the offer was, I was going to pass. I had a hard and firm rule about married women: leave them alone. When 3 finally caught her and kicked her to the curb, she had been hanging around the clubs looking. She was getting child support from 3 different dads and had won a little cash in the last divorce. My opinion was he finally just decided to pay her to leave him alone. So she didn't work, living off her exes. It's not easy, but it can be done. Barb, her husband, is one of my best friends in this world, and I would never do anything to make him think less of me. He wasn't available, and Jen wanted to go out, so here we are. It's just harmless fun to her, and she's having a really good time. Have you once seen her do anything inappropriate? She's either at the table or on the dance floor in plain sight. The guy she's danced with will have a tale to tell for the rest of their lives, holding a woman voted 4th most beautiful in the world at one time. I've seen the way she looks at you, the way you look at her when she's not watching. She's infatuated, and you're in love, maybe. So Barb, but say I did love her, so what? She doesn't love me, and even if she did, she's so far out of reach, I might as well try to grab the sun. I'm just grateful she's my friend, and that her husband trusts us both. Think hard, Barb. Try to remember trust and being worthy of it. It's been a while, I'd wager, since any woman would trust you around her husband, or him around you. You've had, I'm assuming, the total trust and love of 3 men already. How's that working out for you? This is the only time I'm going to say this, Barb, and after that, you're on your own. Time to change your spots, re-evaluate where you are in your life, and change. You'll never be happy or make anyone else happy until you do. You're still attractive under that inch of makeup. Get out of the bars and wash that off. Show the world your real face, and you might find a man who loves looking at it. End of lecture. She stared as she got pale, then red, then pale again. Then she surprised me by crying, little tears at first, then huge drops followed by racking sobs. I didn't know what to do, and it hurt me to think I caused her pain, so I hugged her, which made the tears bigger. I patted her back until she went down to soft sniffles. I didn't see it, but JY had come back. She immediately dug a large wad of tissues out of her purse and gently started cleaning her face, while the sniffles stopped. Then she surprised everyone by taking her hand and leading her to the restroom, taking half the women at the tables with her. JY, thanks to her modeling career, knew quite a bit about makeup. When she reappeared with Barb, the transformation was amazing. Gone were the hard lines and thick makeup. She had makeup on, but it was subtle, flattering instead of hiding. Her hair was different, with a softer, more natural look. I noticed her shirt was buttoned up for the first time in forever. She wasn't flaunting cleavage in your face, oh, the top 2 buttons were still undone, giving tantalizing hints instead of blatant advertising. It didn't take long for the guys to notice. A lot of them didn't realize who she was until they were right in front of her. Men who had walked right by her in the past suddenly found themselves asking her to dance, and for the first time since I'd known her, she said no. A lot. We ended the night on a high note, and I drove, listening to JYN's contented humming. She hummed without realizing when she was really happy, until I realized that every time someone asked her to dance, she looked at JY and answered yes or no depending on her expression. We drove up to her mansion, punched the code into the keypad, and I parked the truck in the garage. It was 2 in the morning, and she told me quite bluntly that I was spending the night, since I'd been up for nearly 20 hours by then, and it seemed like a great idea. When I woke up at 10 in the morning, I found Jen and Steve sipping coffee at the kitchen table. Jen looked stunning as ever, and Steve still had a hint of green around the edges. I smiled. Man, am I ever hungry. We managed to wake Steve up long enough for him to go to bed. After that, I went into the guest room and crashed. I'm going to start preparing breakfast. Eggs with spicy sauce-covered peppers and onions, and spicy sausage. Even better, I'll cook my renowned breakfast chili and serve it with the potatoes and eggs. Fried potatoes with a lot of grease, if they don't drip when served, something went wrong. Additionally, the eggs must be runny in order for the spicy chili to finish cooking them and infuse them with flavor. Steve, how about a large bowl? You can have a Bloody Mary with extra Tabasco sauce to wash it down. Steve's eyes turned greener and greener until he jumped up and ran to the bathroom, at which point I yelled at his retreating back, redneck wisdom here, Steve. You are not required to drink a case of beer just because you brought one. What about breakfast now? I think I drank 4 cups of coffee. They bought the best and had a maker designed by NASA, I believe. It even factored in barometric pressure while it brewed. Jen swatted me on the arm, grinned, and then toasted bagels with jams and cream cheese. It almost made Steve go back to the bathroom. When Jen took me back to my truck, Steve was back on the couch. It's been a long time since I left the house for a fun-filled evening without any other plans. I'm envious of you. Why? Since I lead a modest life. Probably what Steve makes in 2 or 3 days, I make in a year. I have to worry about paying my bills, including my mortgage and car payment, and whether or not my job will last. If the economy declines, I also have to worry about being homeless. You could continue to live exactly as you do now for the rest of your life even if Steve stopped earning money today. You think I care about any of that? Like the guy said, money won't buy you happiness, but it will buy you the best brand of misery. I never would have to worry about what Steve has because I made enough money modeling. My only intention when I stopped modeling was to find a nice man and start a family. When I tried to convince Steve to become a father 3 years in a row, he responded, maybe next year. My time is running out, sweetie. Really? I'm not getting any younger. Do you even look 30? You have all the time in the world, JY, so relax. Believe it or not, that was the first conversation I remembered when I found out he had died. No one notified me, I heard it on the nightly news like everyone else. I drove straight over, only to find the place full of people I didn't know. The a-hole who answered the door didn't want to let me in, so I straight-armed him into the wall, walking by as he sank to the floor. I found Jen in the living room, surrounded by 3 of her college friends, probably the only real friends she had in the whole house. She was sitting there staring blankly, numb from grief no doubt. When she looked at me, she wailed and held out her arms. I soon had her on my lap while she cried like a baby, her friends petting her. The wail subsided to sobs, then sniffles, and then she was out. Her friends gave me a look of gratitude. I knew one, I'd met her at their house, and we'd gotten along to the point she asked me to escort her to an awards dinner. Jen fussed over me like a mother over a 13-year-old. She bought me a new suit, shirt, tie, shoes, and sent me to her stylist. I probably looked the best I was ever going to in my life. When I met her at their house, I was told in no uncertain terms that I was to drive the Mercedes and be a perfect gentleman. Sandy grinned as Jen gave me my instructions, not too perfect, JY. I've never encountered a real live redneck. I've heard they can be lots of fun. I flamed red, and Jen had an expression I couldn't read on her face. We had a really good time. Sandy was a lawyer, a very, very good lawyer as it turned out. The award was for a pro bono case she had won, getting a man who had served 7 years out of jail by proving his innocence. She was now representing the guy in a civil suit against the police department and the DA who had convicted him, proving evidence tampering and outright lies on the witness stand. They were trying to settle for $500,000. Sandy told them they would accept no less than 3. They later settled for $2.2 million. She was smart enough to get it put into payments, $220,000 a year for 10 years. It was enough to set him up in life if he was careful, but it wouldn't bring back the 7 years he lost or his family. His wife had divorced him, taken their daughter, and moved across the state, saying she didn't feel safe exposing their daughter to his lifestyle. She'd remarried and was on the verge of divorce. Sandy got him scheduled visitation and 1 weekend a month for them. She talked him into scheduling counseling sessions for him and his daughter, at first to get them used to each other. It would be rough, but she hoped they'd reconnect. They did, to the point that she petitioned to live with him when her mother's second marriage cratered. In a surprising move, he brought her mother back to town, got her a nice apartment, and supported her until she could provide for herself. He said it was to make up for the child support he should have paid. She hinted, but he turned her down. She'd been pretty abusive in the papers and had refused to let his daughter visit him in prison. Too much water under the bridge. Instead of going to work, he enrolled in community college, then transferred to state, getting a degree in engineering. He and his daughter shared an apartment the last year she was a freshman at the same school. I had a really good time at the awards dinner and enjoyed the dancing afterward. Jen had to teach me to dance in the style expected, and I'm sure she nursed a few bruised toes the first few lessons. I was dressed well enough to fit in, and when asked, I told them I was in construction management, not elaborating that I was actually a crew foreman and made decent money for what I did. I even had a degree in construction management, courtesy of the GI Bill. My bosses were impressed enough to promise the next management position that came available. I was talking to one lawyer I had hit it off with, and Sandy was mingling, networking, I guess is the correct term. I heard her say "I know" really loudly and looked over in time to see her jerk her hand away from a guy. I casually walked over, surprising her by kissing her on the cheek. "Hi, hun, enjoying the evening?" I was, she said darkly, eyeing the guy in front of her. He looked at me and grinned. He had to be 65 or better and weigh over 250. He had muscles, but I was pretty sure they were gym muscles. I was 5 feet 10 inches, weighed 170, and my muscles were earned through hard work. I could see the dismissal in his eyes. I'd seen guys like him a lot, and one thing the military taught me was how to compensate for size. I grinned back. "You want to trade insults, beat on your chest a bit, maybe? How about this, in the interest of time conservation, we should skip the preliminaries and go straight to your bum kicking. I've faced pretty boys like you before, and one thing I've always done, win or lose, is make sure they'll never be as pretty as they were before we started. Then again, you look like you can afford a good cosmetic surgeon. So, you want to tangle, or just tuck your tail and walk away?" He started to bluster, and I held up a hand. "Yes or no, walk or fight. Say anything else, and I will perceive it as a signal to start." He stuttered a few seconds, looked around wildly, but no one seemed interested in backing him, and many seemed to enjoy the thought of watching him get his bum kicked. He deflated like a balloon and walked away. Sandy looked at me like I had grown 2 heads before grinning. "You've destroyed him. You understand that he'll never be perceived as an alpha male by anyone who witnessed what just happened, and they'll be more than eager to spread the story. His power base is gone, and he'll never get it back, at least not here. I'll bet you anything he'll leave the firm in less than 3 months." I shrugged. If it wasn't me, sooner or later it would have been someone else. "Want to dance?" She did. It turns out lawyers make pretty good lovers. She was on me like a cat in heat the moment we pulled away from the curb. 3 blocks later, she shrugged out of the top of her dress. We managed to make it to her garage, where I dragged her out, bent her over the hood, and had a quickie. I probably didn't last 5 minutes, but it was a very intense 5 minutes. So, I grabbed her, carrying her into her house. I was going to put her on the couch, but she revived enough to tell me where the bedroom was. I stood her up, and she shrugged, the dress falling in a bunch to the floor. I didn't know it at the time, but we destroyed a $3,000 designer dress. We went to the bedroom and had amazing sex. "I really, really like you, honey. I'd love to see you again, but I want you to know that right now, my career comes first. I won't be looking for anyone to share my life until I make partner, and that's a few years down the line. Think you can live with that?" I think I surprised her. "I can understand that. You're attractive, great in the sack, and have a nice personality. But I have to be honest, I'm not looking for the house with the picket fence right now. We can still be friends if you like." She grinned. "Make that friends with benefits, and you have a deal. Jen was right about you." I asked, and she just grinned, telling me to get it from JY. Jay was a little off for a while, but after a long talk with her friend, she was back to her sunny self. Sandy gave a glowing report of the date. "I'm glad you're smart enough to keep from getting serious. He's not the one for you." I was sort of depressed. "I don't think there's a one out there for me, Jen. Every time I meet someone, I use you as a measuring stick, and they all fall short." She went red and then seemed to glow, while Steve laughed. "You're ruined, then. My wife is one of a kind, the gold standard of women in this world." Jen really glowed then, and I left, knowing they would be making love before my truck left the driveway. I wasn't jealous, but I did reflect that if he felt that way, he shouldn't neglect her as much. Sandy stood with her friends and motioned for me to follow. I carried her to her bedroom, and they turned down the sheets. I laid her down gently, touching her cheek before I left the room. At least one of her friends stayed with her all night. I went back into the living room, aghast at the sight before me. Somewhere along the line, it started turning into a party. They'd found the liquor cabinet and were going at it pretty hard. I held it together until they turned music on, increasing the volume until it was almost blasting. Sandy came back in and looked at me, knowing what I was thinking. Who are these a-holes? A lot are Steve's business associates, here to stake a claim and begin picking the bones. Some are from her modeling days, and a few of them are going to try to lure her back. The rest are just along for the ride. They'll use her until she comes to her senses, then drift away to another victim. You're her lawyer of record, right? I am. And Jen, she's a doctor if I remember correctly? That's true, she said as she started smiling, realizing where I was going. Then go ask her, in her professional opinion, if this is a good environment for Jen right now. We've already talked about it. It's not, but while we're all intelligent, professional women, there's little we can do with this pack of a-holes. We're thinking of hiring security. I stood. Well, I'm not a woman and have never been known for my smarts. Maybe I can save you a few bucks. I got their attention when I turned off the music. On behalf of JY and Steve, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Jen's doctor has prescribed bed rest. I said quietly, so, if you wouldn't mind honoring her wishes and leave, you can all come back later after she's had time to process. I'm sure she would appreciate it. Who the hell are you, Aioli? Before I could speak, Sandy was in his face. He's probably the only male in here who actually cares about Jenny. Leave her in peace. If not, well, I'll just have to turn my security consultant loose on you. He holds 2 black belts and has been charged with murder twice, but I got it changed to justifiable homicide because he was protecting a client both times. Want to test his limits? None of what she said was true, but they didn't know that. They left grumbling among themselves until it was just me, Janice, Sandy, Melody, and Jen. Janice told us she had given Jen a slight sedative, and she'd probably sleep the night through. She turned to me. Jamie, can you stay? Melody will be here, but we'd feel a lot better if you stayed with her. JY's going to be shaky for quite a while, and she'll need friends around her. I ended up staying for 4 days, moving into the 2-bedroom guest cottage they had, while the women stayed in the house. There was a huge turnout for his funeral, and she held my arm in a death grip, only letting go when I did my pallbearer duties. I sat beside her while the preacher did the graveside service. She cried herself out by then and sat numbly as he droned on. The vultures had decided that with me around, they'd never be able to advance their agendas, so they left us in peace, and we returned to a pretty quiet house, maybe 20 people, but they were all fond of JY. I left the next day after Melody and Sandy assured me they would not leave her alone for a while. I didn't see her again until I was summoned to her house for the reading of the will. It seems Steve had left me a little something. She was 10 pounds lighter and still a little pale, but she smiled when she hugged me. JY naturally got everything, except for a few personal items. He wanted me to have all his fishing equipment, his boat, and his truck. He also left me a letter that I read when I got home. Man, if you're reading this, then I'm dead. That sucks. I'm hoping you're in your 60s when you get this, but I got a feeling that if you're getting what I wanted you to have, it's a lot earlier. I can't tell you what you meant to me. For the first time in my life, I had a friend. A friend that didn't give a damn about how much I had or what I could do for him, but a guy who just wanted to hang out, maybe fish, and have a few beers. Think of me when you're kicked back on the boat reeling in a monster I could only dream about and raise a beer in my memory. Now and then, one more thing. I want you to keep an eye on Jen. I should have been a better husband, but she was still the love of my life. Don't let her do anything foolish while she gets herself back together. I like to think if anything ever happened to me, she'd turn to you. If she doesn't get serious, name the first son Steve. Just kidding, dude, but stranger things have happened, and I know you'd be good for her. Think about it. Ever your friend, Steve. I was a little surprised when a delivery van pulled into my driveway a week later. The guy had a full load and a note. "Jamie, I know you're not expecting this and probably wouldn't take it if you had a choice, but I want you to have them, and I'm taking the coward's way out. I'm leaving for a while. I just can't take another night of rambling around in that big empty house. I'll return, but I can't tell you when. These are Steve's clothes. They'll fit you like a glove, and they're too good to waste. I doubt seriously you will wear more than 2 of the suits for the rest of your life, but it will be nice to have that option. The jeans and the rest of the casual clothes will come in handy as well as the boots. Please don't be offended. I know he would have wanted you to have them if he'd have thought that far ahead. Wear them in good faith, remembering the man who was your friend. Remember too that I was also your friend, and I hope you let me continue to be. Love you, Jen." I let the stuff sit in my spare bedroom for a few weeks before I could work up the energy to start going through them. Who the hell needs 28 suits? In the end, I kept 8, highly expensive and damn good looking. The rest I donated. I'm sure some bargain hunter would freak when they saw them. I kept most of the jeans and casual clothes, and all 36 pairs of the shoes and boots. Each pair probably cost more than I could make in a month. I'd never have to buy shoes again. Life went on. I'd fish once in a while, always feeling guilty when I used the boat and truck. I hardly ever drove the truck because it was just too nice to have around construction sites. I'd go out on the boat, look through the expensive gear, but most often I used the old Zebco rig I had given him. I still remember the night I met him. I didn't have a boat, so I fished from the bank. I was at a hot spot right below the discharge chute of a power plant. A lot of stuff got caught up in the turbulence and came out the other end ground up. It was catfish heaven. I'd already decided to call it a night at 11. I'd caught for pretty decent fish and a 20-pound monster, enough to keep me in catfish for months. Steve came slowly down the path, stumbling in the dark. "You okay, man?" I could tell he was a little buzzed. "Yeah, maybe. My car quit on me a little ways back, and I guess I took a wrong turn somewhere. To top that off, my phone is dead. Can you call an Uber and tell them where to pick me up?" "I'll do it, but we have to get up a little higher for good reception. Why don't you sit here while I square away my gear, and I'll make the call when we get up top. Shouldn't take me long." He sat watching as I reeled in my lines. It seemed that one catfish was determined to commit suicide, dying and hitting just as I was reeling in the last line. Before I knew it, Steve was right beside me, watching in awe. "Here," I said, grinning. "Reel him up for me." He snatched the rod but admitted he had no idea what to do. "Keep the line tight so he can't spit the hook out. Just keep reeling, and when his head comes out of the water, I'll scoop him up with the net." It was a pretty nice cat, 10 pounds at least. I'll never forget the look on his face. "Wow, I've always wanted to catch a fish." He'd never fished before. What planet did this guy live on? He helped me carry my stuff back to the truck, and then we went to look at his car. It was a BMW, all chrome and gleaming paint. "I'll call tomorrow and get it towed." "No, you'll need to call them right now and get them over here. Look around you. We're in the middle of nowhere. If a couple of good old boys were to see this sitting here, the only thing left tomorrow would be the frame. Maybe call them now. I'll have to look somewhere up. Can I use your phone?" I hit speed dial. "Wilbur, yeah, I know it's late, but I got a hot one. A BMW dead at the end of Lookout Point. Can you come and get it?" "We'll wait." I had it on speaker. How the hell did a Beamer get way out there? I think the guy got lost. "Give me 20 minutes. We waited, talking, while he got there. It was dark, there were no lights anywhere, and 10 minutes later, a truck pulled up, and 3 guys got out. They looked around and saw my truck but couldn't see us, thinking it was some guy fishing. They were tugging on the door handles when I turned my lights on. "Move on, boys. Grab your rods and go fishing. They're biting pretty good. It was obvious they'd been drinking pretty hard, and one guy told me to mind my own business or they'd mind it for me. I got out, holding the Taurus .357 down by my side. Move on, or what? Or what? You ain't got no gun. I raised it and popped a round off. .357s are kind of loud, and it echoed off the lake pretty good. They almost drove off before one could get in. He ended up jumping on the bed as they went by. Steve was looking at me like I was an alien. Would you have shot them? I wouldn't have had to. Once they knew I had a weapon, all the fight went out of them. If they had been armed or forced the issue, I would have reacted accordingly. Here comes Wilbur. Wilbur got out, looked over the car, and grinned. I ain't even asking, but you need to get the undercarriage looked at before you drive it. This is a pretty rough road. He gave Steve a card with the address of his garage. I asked him where he lived as Wilbur's tail lights faded. It was less than 20 miles away. He was going to call his wife because he didn't think he could get an Uber in that area. He was probably right. There's no need to get your wife out of the bed at this time of night. I'll take you home. It's kind of on my way. He sat quietly for most of the ride. His drive was a long, winding one that led through trees before it stopped in what could only be called a mansion. You live here? Yeah, I bought it for my wife last year. Care to come in? I don't think so. I'm dirty and I smell like livers, worms, and catfish. Probably not an aroma your wife would appreciate at this time of night. Call Wilbur in the morning. He checked his car over, and the only damage he could find was a bent tie rod. Steve had him fix it and pumped him for information about me when he picked it up. Wilbur told me what he said. Jim's a good guy, Mr. Rodham, and he's probably the best fisherman I've ever seen. He can be on the bank with 20 anglers and be the only one catching anything. When the local fire department needs fish for a fry, they call him. He's usually good for £50 or more. Steve was sitting in my driveway when I got home from work 3 days later. He got out looking embarrassed. Can I talk to you for a minute? I have a business proposition. Curious, I brought him in and gave him a glass of tea. After a few minutes of spitting and sputtering, it came out. I've always wanted to learn how to fish. I'm more than willing to pay if you'll teach me. I can make it worth your while. I thought about it for a few minutes. I could tell he was sincere. All right, be here at 7 Friday night, and we'll spend a few hours catfishing. You'll get the hang of that, and we'll branch out to bass and crappie. I won't charge you anything past the price of the bait and a few beers, so don't insult me with offers to pay. Every man needs to know how to fish. He was so excited he could barely talk. It took about a month before he wanted me to follow him home so he could introduce me to his wife. I had no idea what his wife looked like, but I figured with the kind of money he had, she'd be hot. For once in my life, I got something right. I didn't follow fashion magazines, so I had no idea who she was. I just knew she was probably the most attractive woman I'd ever seen. She smiled and tried to shake my hand, but I snatched it back. Sorry, but I got fish bait on my hands, and it is not a feel or smell I'd recommend to a lady. She just stared for a minute before she grinned. Well then, I insist you come in and wash up so I can greet a new friend properly. I did everything but take a bath in that sink, my urge to not offend her almost paralyzing. I surprised her again when I wouldn't sit on her couch, so she moved us to the kitchen table. I felt a little more relaxed. Where I grew up, friends never went to the front door, hardly ever made it out of the kitchen because there was always a pot on and something fresh out of the oven just begging for an opinion, and never overstayed their welcome. After we got to know each other and I told her about the way I was raised, she grinned. After that, the first thing she did when she knew I was coming was get the coffee ready, turning it on when I came in the door. They kind of adopted me, but I remembered my upbringing and never abused their friendship or stayed over long. Jen was a hell of a woman, but when we met, she had no idea what to do in a kitchen. They had a maid who did most of their cooking when they were home, they ate out a lot, mostly business dinners with the people Steve dealt with. I brought them a pick-and-pound cake, and they raved about it. Steve ate 3 pieces, and Jen ate 2. Shock didn't even begin to describe the look on their faces when I told them I baked it. My mother taught me, it's a family secret going back to my great-grandmother, so don't ask for the recipe. I did end up teaching her how to bake, starting with simple things like banana nut bread and pineapple upside-down cake. She got hooked on Pinterest and YouTube websites and practiced a lot. It got so bad that Steve gained 5 pounds before he begged her to stop. I diverted her by saying there was always a church or civic organization around that was having a bake sale, and they would appreciate anything she was willing to share. That turned out to be a case of exchanging demons, because if she left with 2 cakes, she'd come home with 3. She also made a lot of friends in the community and joined 1 or 2 civic organizations she thought had merit. Oddly enough, many of their meetings ended up held at her house. Jen was happy, saying it gave her something to do while Steve traveled or worked. The fire department was her favorite, and she worked tirelessly to better the state. She donated money, of course, but more valuable was the time she gave. Her local department ended up being one of the best equipped and trained in the state. The only time she flaunted her money was when she read an article saying that cancer was on a meteoric rise in firemen because of fumes and residue from the new materials builders were using. Jen consulted experts and had a modified hazmat shower built and paid for a truck to haul it. She organized the volunteers who trained to set it up and balance the soaps and chemicals needed to decontaminate suits and equipment. Many walked through the shower in full gear before stripping it off and going through it again. Departments from all over the country came to observe the procedure. They were horribly expensive and beyond the means of most volunteer departments, so Jen founded a charity to fund them and served as the face and first chairman. She often made personal appearances across the country to drum up support. She won awards that she accepted with thanks but rarely talked about, preferring to focus on the mission. I escorted her to a couple of functions when Steve was traveling, and most thought I was her husband. She rarely corrected them and giggled about it later. You and Steve look so much alike that it's a common mistake, especially if they've been drinking. Just go with it. When it was time for the annual Christmas parade, our small town insisted she serve as Grand Marshal to honor her for her efforts. She ended up riding on top of an antique fire engine, a 1921 American LaFrance, as a tribute. 41 station center truck, it was the biggest Christmas parade ever held in the town. JY wanted me to ride with her, but I refused. This is your moment, Jen. They want to honor you, so accept it in the spirit it was given. The applause rippled through the town as she passed, and she had tears in her eyes by the time it was over. She told me later, of all the acclaim I've gotten while she modeled, all of it together meant less than what she was given that cold December afternoon. She had been gone for 5 months. She briefly returned to modeling, did a couple of guest appearances on fashion shows, even sat in as a substitute judge for 3 weeks. Then she just disappeared off the face of the earth. I tried calling her a couple of times, but the number had been changed. I called Sandy, and she was in the same boat. She's processing, honey. She thought her life was set. Did you know she was going to have 2 bedrooms decorated for the children she hoped to have? One for a little boy, the other for a girl. Unless she remarries pretty soon, that dream will fade. She's done this before. When her aunt, a woman who practically raised her, passed suddenly, she went off the grid. Then she was gone for 6 weeks, and then she just showed up and carried on like she hadn't been gone and refused to talk about where she had been. Don't worry, Jamie, she'll show back up sooner or later. Remember, her dream house is here. I doubted the validity of that when I saw the house featured on the cover of a real estate magazine. It was priced at $2.2 million, I heard it sold in a week for $2.6, the object of a bidding war between 3 couples. After 9 months, I had reconciled myself to the fact that she was now just a pleasant memory. It was Saturday, and I was in my shop doing what I loved best besides construction management. I held a degree in furniture design. I bought my house partially because it had a large workshop out back, a 24 by 36 metal building. I had a lot of tools, and now that I had room, I bought equipment I hadn't been able to use until then. I had a huge lathe, a steam vat designed to soften wood for bending, a planer capable of working a 30-inch board. In short, I had almost everything a professional furniture maker needed to produce a quality product. I had another shed that held lumber that stayed packed. I had a lot of oak, some pecan, a few black walnut logs, some cedar, even a bit of holly. At that particular moment, I was making a rocking chair for a friend. She was vertically challenged, as she liked to put it. Her adult height was 4 feet 6 inches, and she was the tallest of her siblings. This chair was designed for optimal comfort for her size, somewhere between a child's chair and a full size. I was drum sanding the edges of the seat when I felt the door open. I didn't look up. Most of my friends and neighbors knew what I did most Saturdays, so if they wanted something or stopped by to say hi, they knew to come to the shop first. I finished sanding the bottom and looked up, almost dropping it when I saw who it was. She looked older, she was 15 pounds thinner, and she didn't need to lose weight. Her eyes were sad, but they changed when I looked up. The eyes matched her smile. Instead of hello, her first word surprised me. How come I never knew you made furniture? It never came up in conversation. Besides, it's just a hobby. I'd love to do it full-time, but I'm not sure I could support myself. I'd have to charge some pretty high prices, and I don't think most people could afford it. I know lots of people who would love to have custom-made furniture and wouldn't bat an eye at the price if it was of good quality. You should have let me help you. I struggled for a moment, trying to frame my answer in a way she could understand. Yeah, no. You were my friend, Jen, not some business opportunity. If I'd have come to you, I'd have been just like all the rest of the a-holes you and Steve had to deal with. You would have always wondered if I was truly your friend or just someone I needed to use. So, I didn't bring it up. Steve never knew. If I had told him, he would have hounded me with suggestions like the one you just gave. You were worth more to me as friends. Do you understand? Tears started, and that's why we loved you. I couldn't keep a little bitterness out of my voice. Yeah, I could tell that from all the calls and visits I got from you. I knew you wouldn't understand. I had to leave after a few days. Rattling around in that big old house was just too much. Plus, every time I saw you, it reminded me of Steve. I tried going back to my old life, but that got old pretty quick. I'd forgotten how shallow and calculating most of those people were. I can understand that, but you didn't call Sandy or any of your oldest friends. Think they like being shut out of your life? If you're going to be back for more than a few days, you need to give them a call and try to mend fences. What she'd done hit her, and she cried harder. I shut down my machinery, knowing there would be no more work that day, and took her into the house, making coffee and getting out the pick-and-pound cake I had made the day before. She ate 2 pieces before she started making phone calls. Sandy and the rest of the girls showed up 90 minutes later, kissed me on the cheek, and threw me out of the house. I piddled around before deciding to light my grill. I'd marinated a bunch of leg quarters the night before, so I grilled them, a few steaks, some potatoes, and ears of corn, honey-glazed carrots with toasted pecans. The smell started getting to them, and they drifted out to my deck. My house was manufactured because it was the most house I could get for the money, but I had modified it quite a bit and was inordinately proud of my multi-level deck with a built-in table that wrapped in a semicircle around a big oak. It was the first time any of them had been there, so they wandered around, checking out my koi pond complete with a little island that held a large Japanese lantern and admiring a vegetable garden that looked laid out with military precision. They were surprised. One whole section was nothing but flowers. I had sunflowers of all sizes and colors, zinnias, African daisies, different colors of cosmos, and marigolds. When I called them to eat, I was amazed. They ate like construction workers, not fashion models or professional women. They laughed about the whole roll of paper towels they had to use. Sandy sat back and let loose a very unladylike belch, which broke the whole group up. I'm thinking, Jamie, that I need to review my relationship expectations. You cook, you build furniture, and you ain't hard to look at. Everyone laughed, but Jen, and she looked a little irritated. The girls caught it and grinned harder, teasing her by giving me their numbers. I looked at Melody. Aren't you married? I am, and I love him dearly. I wanted you to have my number so we could set up some training sessions for hubby. He could use a few pointers. They relaxed as twilight gathered, owing when I switched on my party lights, especially enjoying the Japanese lantern on the little island. All the lights were designed to draw insects away from the deck. I brought out a carafe of coffee and the pick-and-pound cake. They groaned but managed to eat every bite of it. They all demanded the recipe. Sorry, girls, but it's a family secret. He won't even give it to me, and I begged for almost 2 years. He says it will stay in the family. Sandy looked at Jen and smirked. Well, then we'll have to get him married off to one of us to ensure a steady supply. Any volunteers? To a woman, they all turned to Jen. She was glowing but promised to do a little research. There were a lot of hugs and kisses as they left. Sandy got me off to the side. I know men are thick most of the time, so let me lay it out for you. She didn't come back for us, she came back for you. If you're not interested, let her down gently. If you are, go slow, she's still a little fragile. I was taken completely by surprise. I guess men are dense. Here, let me put it in perspective for you, she continued. She's miles above me, Sandy. She's rich, beautiful, and I'm just an average guy trying to make ends meet. It would never work. She slapped me lightly. God, you're even dumber than most. She couldn't give a damn about what you have. She doesn't need possessions or riches, she already has those. She needs a man who loves her in spite of all that. One thing I can be assured of, if you get together, it won't be because of her money or your perceived lack of it. You can give her what she desires most in this world, and it won't cost either of you a dime. She wants the love of a good man and a family. She's talked about children ever since we were in college. Man up, Jamie. Be the one. We waved as they left and went back into the house. Where are you staying? I know you sold the house, she seemed surprised. I'm staying with you, at least for a while. You don't mind, do you? I can get an extended stay suite somewhere if you do, but I'd really like to stay here. I want to surround myself with real, not the illusion I've been living with lately. Please? I thought about it for a minute, looking at her anxious face, then I sighed. Yeah, you can stay. I guess I'll have to get used to one of the most beautiful women in the world hogging my bathroom. The sacrifices one makes for friendship.